information about what defines this plot, which means if you include these elements in your story, by the end of it, you will have made this type of plot. So the status quo, for example, is an initial antagonism. The plot trigger introduces the characters, and sometimes it creates the emotional obstacle as well. And it's the motivation is what keeps these two people together. So they don't like each other. Draco and Hermione are like, Motherland, the canon, 5 years of hatred. But then Snape is like, no, you are required to work together in potions. And so that's the motivation, is they're forced together. Then there's a setup which gives you that details and nature of like what it's going to be like. So you have that first moment where Hermione and Draco are interacting, and they're rude, and Hermione's like, I'm just going to do this myself, and Draco's muttering under his breath, and that gives you the idea like this is going to be how they're going to try to figure out how to treat each other in this potions thing. And it gives you what the general nature of this problem looks like and what they're facing. Then the stakes. This is what comes up in a lot of the external plots, where like, if you don't put the ring in Mordor, then the whole world is doomed. You know, there's a what happens if you fail? What happens if you succeed? In romances, usually there's not much that happens if you fail at falling in love, other than you stay not in love. And if you succeed at falling in love, you're like, yes, I've succeeded at falling in love, and now I'm in love, and that's good. But it's not like the world ends. But you can do that. There's certainly, especially if you interweave plots. And we have a video on how to do that and what it includes. And if you're interweaving plots, sometimes the stakes of one start interweaving with the other. But otherwise, when this story is just on its own, just this plot one at a time, doesn't tend to have stakes. The first action is, in this case, is that the characters are usually like attempted to reject the other. So like Hermione is rude to Draco and is like slams her cauldron on the table and is like, I'm doing this myself. That's her first reaction to the situation. Then in the middle, you're going to have multiple phases. You're going to progress in small successes and setbacks, and you're going to have that like the rejecting each other nature of like slamming cauldrons and stuff is going to be maybe a first phase of just rejecting each other. And then later you see something start to grow between them. And then maybe you do a third phase where they know they're in love, but they're not telling each other. And, you know, they're still resisting it in themselves. And so you have that last phase. And usually stories have about 2 to 3 phases. Then the characters are going to learn about each other. That's the thing that within the plot they're learning is information about the other person and where they're coming from and their perspectives and appreciating them and that kind of thing. And then there's tension, which is usually in this case added via a tragic misunderstanding or a past betrayal. And it's like Draco says something that makes Hermione think that he thinks very, very ill of her because she's a Muggle born, and she's like, how could you? I didn't, you know, and they're the big thing. And then that usually is the thing that when it builds up enough tension causes the low point. So then Hermione believes the worst of Draco again and pulls away, and it's tragic. And then hits the climax in which maybe they have this like shouting argument in the hallways where finally Draco, you know, apologizes for his past but explains his thing, and she's like, oh gosh, I didn't know. And then that's the thing that ends when they accept their love. And you have the confirming incident that says like, yes, this was definitely accepting their love. Maybe he goes down on one knee and asks her to marry him. And that's there's this large declaration or loving action that'll happen in these. And then you get the reward, which is usually just like, now you're in love and it's amazing. But you can also, you know, weave these other plots where the falling in love helped one of them grow in a certain way. And then you have other rewards tied in. But if this plot's just on its own, it's usually just like, then you have the emotional moments and it's beautiful. And you're like, oh, love. And so then what we've done is we take this like blast of information of like, this is what this plot does. And I found that then when I went, it was amazingly helpful to go, oh my gosh, that is what happened. Like, I always knew these things in this kind of intuitive way, but having them be 20 of them lined up and just told to me made this line of clarification that was lovely. But you can do a really cool thing in going, okay, now I ask myself as I'm trying to make a plot, the individual questions that form these. So what we've done, that I was showing you guys before, is make these worksheets out of these, which asks the question that leads to the result of making one of these plots. So you can go through one at a time And I find this cuts down on my anxiety a lot because I start going, oh, this one question, that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm doing. So you'll say, okay, I'm just looking at what moment creates the emotional obstacle between the characters. Or in 5 words or less, what is this first phase? And I go through one at a time.